Welcome back to Declutter and Done. This is about simplifying life by removing what quietly drains your energy. Even when nothing looks chaotic, daily decisions and unnecessary habits can still make life feel heavy. In this video, I'm sharing simple minimalist habits that helped me reduce mental noise and create more breathing room in everyday life. Nothing extreme, just small shifts that made things feel lighter and more manageable. Let's get into it. Let's start with something that quietly drains more energy than we realize: daily decisions. Most of us don't feel tired because we do too much physical work. We feel tired because from the moment we wake up, we are constantly deciding what to wear, what to eat, what to start first, what to postpone, what can wait, what shouldn't. None of these decisions are big on their own, but together they create a steady mental pressure that follows us throughout the day. The problem isn't that we're bad at making decisions. It's that we're making far too many of them, especially for things that don't really matter. When every small choice requires thought, your mind never fully rests. You may notice that by the end of the day, even simple tasks feel heavy. Not because they're difficult, but because your mental energy is already spent. When I started paying attention to this, I realized how many decisions I was repeating every single day. The same questions, the same hesitation, the same back and forth in my head. So instead of trying to be more productive, I did the opposite. I started removing decisions altogether. I simplified what I eat, how I dress, and how I start my day, not to be strict, but to make those choices automatic. The shift was subtle, but the effect was clear. With fewer decisions to make, my days felt calmer. I had more mental space for things that actually mattered, and less exhaustion from things that didn't. Reducing daily decisions isn't about controlling your life. It's about protecting your energy so you can use it where it counts. Tomorrow we'll continue with another small shift that helps life feel lighter without doing more. Next, let's talk about why keeping things for a someday version of yourself quietly makes everyday life heavier. Sometimes life feels heavy, not because you're doing too much, but because you're carrying versions of yourself that don't exist anymore. One of the quiet reasons life becomes heavier is that we keep things for a future version of ourselves instead of the life we're actually living. Not who we are today, but who we believe we should become one day, with more time, more energy, or more discipline. The problem isn't the objects themselves. It's the pressure attached to them. Every item kept for someday carries a silent expectation, a reminder that you're not there yet. Over time, these expectations pile up and turn your space into something that demands more from you than it supports you. I didn't realize this until I noticed how often I avoided certain things, not because I disliked them, but because they belonged to a version of me I couldn't realistically maintain. Keeping them wasn't motivating. It was quietly draining. The shift came when I stopped choosing things for who I hoped to be and started choosing for how I actually live. Instead of asking whether something might be useful one day, I asked whether it fits my current routines and energy. That change alone removed a surprising amount of guilt and mental weight. Letting go of imaginary versions of yourself isn't about giving up. It's about being honest with your real life. When your space and habits support who you are now, everything feels lighter and easier to move through. Potential sounds hopeful, but usefulness is what actually supports your daily life. One reason we keep things longer than necessary is because we focus on what they could be used for, not what they are doing for us right now. Something might have potential, a future purpose, or a just-in-case value, but if it isn't useful in your current life, it quietly becomes another thing you have to manage. The problem with choosing potential over usefulness is that potential always asks for more from you. More time, more effort, more attention in the future. Useful things, on the other hand, give back immediately. They save time, reduce friction, and make everyday tasks easier without demanding extra energy. I noticed that many things I kept weren't helping me at all, but they still required decision storage and mental tracking. Once I started asking a simpler question, does this make my life easier right now? Decisions became quicker and much less emotional. Shifting your focus from potential to usefulness isn't about being wasteful or short-sighted. It's about choosing support over possibility. When what you keep actually serves your daily life, there's less to manage, less to think about, and more space to focus on what truly matters. Next, we'll look at why choosing convenience over aesthetics can quietly make everyday life much easier. A life that looks good isn't always a life that feels easy to live in. We often choose things because they look right, not because they work well for our daily routines. Something can be beautiful, minimal, or aesthetic, but if it requires extra steps, extra care, or extra effort, it quietly adds friction to everyday life. The problem with prioritizing aesthetics is that it usually asks more from you than you realize. You have to remember where things go, how they should be used, and how to keep them looking a certain way. Over time, this creates small but constant demands that drain energy, especially on tired or busy days. I noticed that the things I used most were never the most beautiful ones. They were the easiest to reach, the quickest to use, and the least demanding. Once I allowed convenience to matter more than appearance, daily tasks felt smoother and required far less mental effort. Choosing convenience over aesthetics isn't about lowering your standards or living in a messy space. It's about designing life to support how you actually function, not how you think it should look. When things are easy to use, they get used, and life naturally feels lighter. This shift becomes even more powerful when you apply it to how your days are structured, not just to the things around you. A complicated routine can make life feel heavy even in a simple space. Many people try to simplify their lives by focusing on what they own, but overlook how much energy their daily routines consume. When routines are overfilled, overplanned, or overly optimized, they demand constant attention and decision-making, even if your environment looks minimal. The problem with complex routines is that they leave no room for real life. When every day requires you to follow a long list of ideal habits missing, one step can feel like failure. This creates pressure instead of support, turning even simple days into something you have to manage carefully. I noticed that the days I felt most drained weren't the messy ones, but the ones with too many expectations built into them. Once I started removing steps instead of adding better ones, my days felt calmer. Fewer routines meant fewer decisions, and fewer decisions meant more mental space. Simplifying routines isn't about being lazy or unstructured. It's about building days that still work when your energy doesn't. When your routines are simple enough to survive real life, everything else becomes easier to carry. When tasks stop spreading across your day, they also stop taking up unnecessary space in your head. When one task lives in too many places, it starts taking up more space in your head than it should. A common source of mental clutter isn't how many tasks you have, but how scattered they are. The same activity happens in different rooms, different moments, and different setups, which means your brain has to reset every time. Even simple tasks begin to feel heavier because they never feel contained. The problem with this kind of scattering is that nothing ever feels finished. When a task can happen anywhere, it quietly follows you everywhere. Your mind keeps it open, waiting for the right moment, the right place, or the right energy that rarely comes. I noticed that certain tasks felt exhausting, not because they were hard, but because they were mentally unfinished all day long. Once I limited where those tasks could happen, they stopped floating around in my thoughts. Having clear boundaries made it easier to start, easier to stop, and easier to move on. Limiting where tasks happen isn't about being strict. It's about giving your mind fewer things to track. When each task has a clear place, it takes up less mental space and your day feels calmer without you doing less. And once tasks are contained, the next thing to look at is whether they're made easy enough to actually happen. Most of the time, the problem isn't that you lack motivation. It's that things are harder than they need to be. When something requires too many steps, too much setup, or too much mental effort, your brain naturally resists it. We often respond by trying to push ourselves harder, blaming a lack of discipline when the real issue is that the task itself creates unnecessary resistance. The problem with relying on motivation is that it's inconsistent. Some days you have it, many days you don't. Designing your life around motivation means things only work on your best days, not on the tired, distracted, or low-energy ones. I noticed that the habits I kept consistently weren't the ones I felt most motivated to do, but the ones that were easiest to start. Once I focused on removing small obstacles instead of pushing myself harder, things began to happen naturally without force or guilt. Removing friction isn't about lowering expectations. It's about making the right actions the easiest ones. When effort is reduced, consistency becomes automatic, and life feels lighter without constant self-negotiation. When effort drops, it becomes clearer which things are still worth managing and which ones never really needed your energy in the first place. A lot of mental exhaustion comes from maintaining things that don't actually support your life. We often think something only becomes a problem when we use it too much. In reality, many things drain us simply because they exist and need to be managed. They require decisions, attention, and occasional maintenance, even when they add very little value to our daily life. The issue with unnecessary things isn't the space they take up, but the energy they quietly consume. Each item, commitment, or habit you don't truly need still asks for upkeep. Over time, this creates a background noise that makes life feel busier than it really is. I noticed that once I stopped holding on to things out of habit or obligation, my days felt calmer. Fewer things to manage meant fewer reminders, fewer decisions, and fewer unfinished thoughts pulling at my attention. Stopping the management of what you don't need isn't about having less for the sake of less. It's about freeing energy for what actually matters. When you reduce what needs, your care life becomes simpler without you having to try harder. With fewer things demanding attention, it also becomes easier to accept when something doesn't need to be perfect to be good enough. Trying to make everything perfect is one of the fastest ways to make life feel heavy. Perfection often shows up disguised as care or responsibility. You want things to be done properly, completely, and the right way. But when that standard applies to everything, even small tasks begin to feel demanding, and finishing them becomes harder than starting. The problem with perfection is that it stretches tasks beyond what they need to be. More checking, more adjusting, more thinking. Over time, this creates hesitation and delay. Not because the task is difficult, but because the standard attached to it is exhausting. I noticed that many things moved forward only after I allowed myself to stop earlier. Once good enough became acceptable, decisions became faster, and energy stayed intact. Things didn't fall apart, they simply stopped taking more from me than they needed. Letting good enough be enough isn't about lowering quality. It's about recognizing when extra effort no longer adds real value. When you release the need to perfect everything, life gains momentum and feels much easier to carry. And once perfection is no longer the goal, it becomes easier to design days that still work when you don't feel your best. A system that only works on your best days isn't a supportive one. Many routines and habits are built for when you feel focused, motivated, and energetic. But real life is full of tired days, distracted days, and days where you're simply doing the minimum. When your systems depend on high energy, they quietly fail most of the time. The problem with designing for ideal days is that it creates constant friction. You feel behind, unproductive, or disappointed, not because you're failing, but because the system was never meant for the reality you live in. This gap between expectation and energy is exhausting. I noticed that the days that felt easiest weren't the most productive ones, but the ones where my setup required very little from me. Once I adjusted my routines and environment to work on low-energy days, consistency stopped feeling like a struggle. Designing for low-energy days isn't about lowering standards. It's about making sure life still functions when you don't have much to give. When your systems support you at your lowest, everything feels lighter at every other level. When life becomes easier on hard days, it also changes how you notice what quietly drains you day after day. Small, repeated drains matter more than rare big problems. Most of the time, what exhausts us isn't one major issue, but the same small things that keep pulling at our attention every single day. Because they seem minor, we get used to them and stop questioning their impact, even though they quietly wear us down. The problem with repeated drains is that they become invisible. You don't feel them as a clear source of stress, just a constant sense of tiredness or irritation you can't quite explain. Over time, this makes life feel heavier without any obvious reason. I noticed that once I started paying attention to what annoyed or tired me repeatedly, patterns became clear. Certain tasks, habits, or expectations showed up again and again as energy leaks. Addressing just a few of them made a noticeable difference without changing much else. Noticing what drains you isn't about fixing everything. It's about awareness. When you see where your energy quietly goes, you gain the ability to choose what's worth keeping and what isn't. And once those patterns are clear, it becomes easier to choose ease over guilt in everyday decisions. Guilt is one of the heaviest things we carry without realizing it. Many everyday choices aren't guided by what actually helps us, but by what we think we should do. We keep habits, commitments, and even objects, not because they support our life, but because letting go feels wrong, wasteful, or irresponsible. The problem with guilt-based choices is that they quietly drain energy. Each time you keep something out of obligation, it adds a small layer of pressure. Over time, life starts to feel heavy, not because it's complicated, but because you're constantly managing expectations that no longer fit you. I noticed that when I allowed ease to matter more than guilt, decisions became simpler and lighter. Letting go didn't create chaos, it created relief. Life didn't fall apart. It finally felt aligned with the energy I actually had. Choosing ease over guilt isn't about being careless or selfish. It's about respecting your limits and your real life. When your choices support you instead of judging you, everything becomes easier to carry, and that's when life starts to feel human again. You don't have to get rid of everything, just dare to choose again. The key isn't about throwing everything out, but about making intentional choices. You don't need to part with everything, just the things that no longer serve you. By doing this, your space will feel lighter and more manageable. Try experimenting with one item you're unsure about. Start with the one thing that's been difficult to part with. I bet once you let go of it, you'll realize how much space and clarity you gain from just one simple decision. It's a small step, but it can have a big impact. If you want to understand the psychology behind clutter, stay with this series. We'll continue exploring more strategies to help you create a more organized, peaceful environment. By applying these tips, you'll not only have a tidier home, but also a clearer, more focused mind.